Hello and welcome to the Discovering Spirituality podcast, Episode 8, Destiny. In this podcast, I will be sharing my thoughts on the writing Destiny, taken from the channel book The Light in Your Life is Spirit by George A. Thomson. At this point, this moment in time, consider the reality that surrounds you at this moment. Where do you find yourself? Are you happy? Is life easy or is it a struggle? Are your needs met? Do you have desires and longings? Are you rich or poor, popular or alone? Are you fulfilled or confused, vocal or silent? Do you know how you reached this point in time? Does it live up to your expectations? Most people, if asked, would always say that they want more. There's that missing something that would bring them complete satisfaction. But in reality, would it? What is it that people want? Comfort, wealth, happiness? What if we got it wrong? What if the aims and goals for society are in fact toxic? What if they are misleading? What if the systems that we created to define success ultimately spell our doom? What if we cannot escape from this self-imposed prison? What if there is no hope? What would it take for man and society as a whole to realise that the plans laid before us do nothing more than leave us feeling empty and full of regret? Would those systems need to collapse in order for us to realise what we're left with, what gives us meaning and purpose? If they did collapse, how and what would we rebuild? Would we try to resurrect the failing system, or would we create something new, something that does not enslave us, something that empowers us, something that values life and the responsibility we all have to take care of it, something that does not involve corruption and greed, lies and deception? Could we do this? Could we discover our noble self? That part of us that thinks beyond our selfish needs and acts with compassion? Do we have the power to change? One could look at the toxicity of our society and feel helpless and hopeless. There are, of course, many problems with degrees of complexity that are far beyond our comprehension. But that does not stop us from changing what we can within ourselves. That we can do, from the richest to the poorest. We all have the capacity for change. So what is it that stops us? Fear? Fear causes us to revert back to our primitive programming. Fear is the mind killer, the emotion that disables our rational thought and makes enemies out of friends. Ask yourself how rational you would be if survival was your only option. What would you do? Could you overcome your fears? What if I told you that you already exist in a state of survival, that beneath the thin veneer of social civility lurks a body of fear that, if fractured, sends the world into chaos? Life as you know it is based on accumulation, and if access to accumulation suddenly stops, what do you think would happen? Of course, people would become very scared and confused. Their purpose, their life's meaning, would disintegrate before their very eyes. They would feel angry and lash out. And of course, they would assign the blame at those individuals whose faith they invested in. Not a pretty picture. Would you feel angry and lost? Would you be confused and frightened? Or would you feel excited and open to a new vision of living? Would you welcome this opportunity even though, unlike the social plan, you were unaware of the direction or the end result? Do you think that you have the strength for such an undertaking? If status, financial reward and comfort is not the direction or the path that you wish to follow, then what is the alternative? Where do you direct your focus and find meaning? How would you define your purpose? Looking back at history, we can see the factors that encouraged and helped man to evolve. There was curiosity. We developed meaningful relationships and a sense of community. There was a love for family, educating children, being creative, problem solving, educating yourself, learning, being compassionate, having integrity, resolving conflicts and being grateful, respecting the environment. Could we be a better people with having less, without the need to have things? What if this was your purpose, to be a better person? If you make this choice consciously, it is inevitable that you will be confronted with your failings. These would be all the negative emotions that you have accumulated until that point. This is not an easy path to follow, as there will always be temptation to challenge you. But by having faith in the purpose of your endeavours, you will start to understand their value. There will be the highs and there will be the lows. There will be times when you regress and times when you will grow. This is the path of growth. You may feel alone at times, but as your awareness grows, you will pay attention to the movement around you. There will always be that invisible hand guiding you along the way. Your conscience will guide you, your capacity to reason, your ability to observe and to think. Chance encounters along the way will open doors, moments, feelings of intuition, that inner voice. Pay attention to it. Get to know it. Learn to differentiate between the angel and the demon, the voice of desire and the voice of reason, the voice of love and the voice of fear. I am thinking about how I reached this point in my life, where I am and who I am with. I can look back and recall every moment, every person, and mostly every decision that got me here. I recall the books that inspired me and the people that gave them to me, all of the countries I've visited, and the journey I took. What strikes me as I look back at these events is the inner feeling that I knew I was going to do the right thing. These were my finest moments of clarity, the moments when I knew for certain the choice I was making. I never knew what the outcome would be or the people I would meet. I just knew I had to do it. The most significant callings were the countries I visited. In these places, I knew I had to be there, even though I did not know the reason why. And now I am here. At the moment, I am writing a lot, which I find very enjoyable. I have learned so much in such a short period of time. The interesting part about this process is what I am learning seems to stem from what I am writing, what I am thinking about. What started this process was just a thought, and I acted upon it. I first read a passage from George's book, then I write about it every night. I read the same passage over and over again each night, and I write. Every time I write, I learn something new, something undiscovered. I find it exciting and I look forward to writing every day. Today's writing is different though. Today I choose to write about my experience working through George's book. This week's writing is called Destiny, and this particular writing is hard work. But maybe writing compels the reader and encourages the reader to take stock of how they reached a certain point of view in their life. When I think about it, how I got here, I am surprised by the clarity with which I remember and how certain I was. I just knew the decision I was making was right. Maybe not right, but I knew that this is what I must do. There is no other way to explain it. The people I met, the countries I visited, the books I read that triggered these moments. Not so much influenced or inspired, just triggered. Like something inside of me aligned. It's really hard to describe. If anything, it has reminded me what I need to pay attention to. That inner alignment. I think I'll call it that. I'm also curious when it will happen again. I'm thinking about in the future. Ironically, it's only now when reviewing the past do these events appear with clarity and make sense. At the time, I never really gave it much thought, or maybe I did. I recall writing a journal when I returned home from Australia, and whilst there, I was paying attention to my life's synchronicity. At the time, I was reading the book The Celestine Prophecies by James Redfield. Maybe I'm being gently reminded of this concept once again, and to be mindful of it. I wonder why. One of the most difficult challenges for any human in the modern age is to establish truth from fiction, the truth from within the lies. The trouble is that the lie has become normal and accepted. So for anyone seeking an alternative path, the problem arises that within the normal they become abnormal. It is very common to feel isolated and lonely, since very few people see beyond this manufactured reality. There is also the fact that as you become more aware, you begin to realize that for any progress to be made, you are the one that's going to have to make it. This can compound the challenge even further due to the realization that there is a lot about life that you yourself don't understand. So the awakened individual finds themselves in a place that is not exactly ideal for personal growth, coupled with the fact that very few people understand this calling, and also the one person you need to rely on is you, and you don't know that much. Then there is all the misunderstanding and misleading sages, all claiming to know the answer to what you're looking for. It all seems to be figured out, and reading a book or going to a lecture will have you on the path to enlightenment in no time. Very often, the teaching of sages leads to confusion and uncertainty, so it can be very tempting to just abandon one's pursuit of truth. So how do you know you are growing as a being? How do you know that you're on the right path? How do you know you're fulfilling your destiny? The question is, do you want to know? The one thing we cannot escape yet desperately try to avoid is our responsibility to ourselves and others. Most of the time we offer lip service to our responsibilities and seldom question the focus of our responsibilities. Again, we come back to the question of choice. Who are we really being responsible for? One could see this as another path towards selfishness, and to a degree it is. But personal growth is not just about desire, or at least it should not be. To selfishly focus on your desire is the path that leads to unhappiness. You could argue that you do learn about yourself if you endeavour to fulfill your needs. The problem with the pursuit of desire is that it acts like a trap and narrows one's focus. It is the perception and definition of one's needs that should be examined and questioned. Our modern society has defined what our needs should be, and to successfully fulfill these needs, one has to follow a specific direction in order to meet them. This is how success is defined. So what is lacking is any true understanding of what our needs are, our needs as a true being. Understanding who we are has to be left with the philosophers and sages to figure out, which is all well and good, but do we know who we are? Most to the point, does this matter to us? Does the pursuit of self-understanding provide us with any meaning? One of the most compelling motivators for human beings is the need to find love. Not necessarily to understand it, but just to have it, to feel loved and to be loved. This emotion gives people a sense of belonging, as well as feeling needed, like their being provides something that someone else needs. Love, despite being a fairly generic term, is a concept that is very complex to understand and takes lifetimes to fully comprehend with any degree of clarity. So what does love and destiny have to do with each other? Love is a complex emotion, but can we say that we understand its meaning? We usually associate love with some sort of bond or emotional attachment or investment. We love our companions, our friends, family, and pets. We can love our job or a place we visit. We can say we love objects like our cars and homes. We can love certain types of music, culture, or literature. There are many things that we can attribute love to. We could say that we derive meaning from these things we assign as to loving. But what if the word love is used as a kind of catch-all definition? In most cases, that could be true, as far as loving objects goes. But when it comes to loving another human being, the scope of our association with love becomes more complex. Consider the following scenario. Let's forget the word love and explore the deeper meaning behind our emotional investments. When we say we love someone, what is it that we are actually saying? Are we saying that we are simply attracted to the individual, or do we feel a sense of comfort in their presence? Is it their mannerisms, their talents? Is it the familiarity of their company? Is it that we have a fear of losing them, or is it the way we complement each other? Most of the complexities involved in the pairing process, as well as relationship maintenance, can be explained without the need for the word love. So is there something else that compels us to use this word that is beyond the bounds of normal description? After all, love is something we feel. What if love means something completely different? If love is a word to describe a feeling, what is it that we actually feel? What if our destiny is to discover what love actually means? Very often, humans reach a point later in life when they start to question who they are and what their life means to them. If there is a path, then surely there has to be a destination. If there is a path that is created prior to the soul's entering the earthly realm, then one may consider its trajectory with some importance. The question is, where does this path lead? What is it that we will discover along the way? Where does it take us if all goes well? If the benchmarks of social and financial wealth leave us with nothing of any real substance, then we need to question, or at least examine, the alternatives. Do we follow the religious path or the spiritual path as the alternative? After all, one has to take into consideration the sheer scale of religious belief, which accounts for billions of people worldwide. What if the path leads us towards knowing God? What if that's the plan, the divine plan, and the soul is a homing beacon that helps us to illuminate the path for us? Of course, we have the choice to either get to know or deny God. What if we consciously make the choice to know God, to understand God? Where the hell does one start? Is it as simply as saying, I believe in a single God? That could be a start. You could become the follower of a religion. They seem to have a lot of experience knowing God, don't they? If God is not a thing, or an it, or a person, then what are we getting to know? If God is love, do we need to understand what love is in order to know God? Is it really that simple? Or is it that complicated? I would venture towards the latter. Does getting to know God involve education and study like a theologian? Do we become psychologists to understand the nature and need for belief? Do we speak to sages, clerics, imams, rabbis to understand what God is? Do we read a religious book of some sort? Is it as simple as having faith that there is a God and that this God created the human soul? And your life's meaning and purpose is to understand this creator, this power, this force, so we may grow our soul so we can attain spiritual enlightenment. If this is the case, then in between, the striving for earthly success seems utterly pointless. It's not like we learn nothing, but the investment in our identity, our materialism, our education seems like nothing more than a distraction until we reach a point midlife when the purpose of our being comes into question, leaving us with regret and pain, and more questions than answers. Overall, by the time you reach this point, you're probably more confused than when you were in your 20s. This can be a very challenging time for most. You can either start paying attention or continue on the path of least resistance and ignorance. If the path, your path, is to seek out and understand God, living in a society that sees no value in such an endeavour, and where the religions that are supposed to know about God barely understand this deity they worship, what are you left with? There is also the challenge of dealing with an internal force that seems hell-bent on dragging you and reminding you that the choices you make in life are questionable, and you need to examine and to rid yourself of an identity that you have spent years developing just so you can fit in. The only one who seems to know what's going on is God. And he gave you free will, which makes the whole process about 1,000 times harder, because you're weak-minded, living in a body that has a will of its own most of the time. The most important things to your average human being is to get laid, make money, look good, eat, sleep, and to be as comfortable as possible whilst dealing with the primitive instincts that leave you living in a perpetual state of fear. How the hell are you supposed to get to know the creator of the universe in the middle of that storm? And in amongst all that, your destiny is the last thing that you're paying attention to. So my questions now are, how can I talk to God? Is he listening? And how do I know I am understanding things enough so I can get off this planet? Of course, God is not going to reveal the complete truth of his divine plan. Where's the fun in that? We would learn nothing if that was the case. And those were my thoughts on the writing Destiny. If you are interested in reading the writing from the book, The Light in Your Life is Spirit, you can download it from the link in the description below. You can also read the full transcript of this podcast by visiting discoveringspirituality.net. If you like the topics discussed in this podcast, please feel free to subscribe and hit the like button. Also, by hitting the notification button, you can stay up to date when a new podcast is available. Thank you for listening.